I can't even tell you that just 8 years ago, I was working 9 to 5 job and coming home and having nervous breakdowns in my bathroom before coming out to feed my kids and wondering how I'm gonna figure this out, to being where I am now.
I'm CBS 46 News anchor Tracy Hutchins, and this is She's in Charge. Now, this is something important to know. Georgia ranks 5th in the U.S. for the greatest number of women-owned firms, and they pour roughly $56 billion into the economy. That is a lot of money. So we're talking women who really mean business here. Joining us today, DIY fashion expert Mimi G. So excited to have her. She's turned a hobby into a successful business, really defying the odds here, going from living on the streets of LA to being an influential woman in the DIY fashion world. Mimi G, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to have you do that intro every time
I
go
know.
on air.
Anytime you walk into a
I'm
room,
just
right?
gonna call you.
I would love to be there. So I had a chance to check out your website, and this is one of those things where, you know, we want to talk about a lot of things, but most importantly, what made you decide to start your own business? Why did you take the leap?
You know, I tell the story all the time. It was sort of an accident. I had tried many times to sort of do my own business, even working full-time jobs. I was like, you know, at some point, I feel like I need to have my own business. So I had a cleaning service. I had like a receptionist via phone, via internet, you know, before that was even like a thing. I tried a lot of different things that did not work. But I just knew that I was supposed to do something. And I was working a 9 to 5, actually more like 16-hour days, because I worked in film and production of all things, which then later became sort of really helpful to my career. But at the time, if you work in film and production, you know that there's really long hours, especially in film and TV. And, you know, I would find myself sort of, I don't know, unhappy, right? I was driving into work every day. I would cry. I would drive home. I would cry.
No.
And I felt like I was sort of trapped in this cycle of like, you know, I was taking care of my family. I was the sole breadwinner at the time. And, you know, I had these kids and I had all these bills and I was barely making ends meet. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And actually what started as the blog was my way of sort of doing a little bit of self-therapy. Because at the time, I just sort of felt like I was drowning, which I think happens to a lot of moms and women who find themselves in positions where they feel like I'm supposed to be doing something greater than I'm doing. I'm supposed to be living in my purpose. I just don't know what that purpose is.
But you know that it doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. And, you know, like I said, I worked in film production. I traveled a lot. I got to meet celebrities. I was on set. It was, for the most part, you know, exciting to an extent, you know, until you hurry up and wait and you're sitting around for 12 hours waiting for something to happen. But I found myself sort of gravitating back to my hobby, which was sewing. So I started sewing again after not sewing for many years. And I was sitting at work one day looking at all of these, sort of searching the internet, and I found all of these blogs about sewing. And there were all these women who were making their own clothes at home. And I thought, oh, well, I do that. And so I started following. And then I said, you know, maybe I should do a blog. Maybe I should start. So I started my blog as a hobby, as a way for me to sort of look back at the end of the year and say, oh, look what I've done, right? A journaling experience. And sewing for me was very therapeutic. It sort of took me away from all the troubles, all the issues, all the things I hadn't even dealt with yet. And, you know, I did it on and off for a couple of years because, quite honestly, in 2008, when I first did, I didn't even know what a blog was, really. Like,
and you
what?
certainly didn't think you could make money doing it.
Definitely did not know that. And so I left it alone, you know, on and off. And then in 2012, I told myself, you know what, you need to discipline yourself. If you really want to do this, do it consistently. Start sharing on a more consistent basis and really see, you know, what you can do. So I started to do that. And within that first year, I'd gone from like 0 page views to over 1 million page views just that first year. And it quickly grew. And then I realized that what separated me from all of these other blogs that I have found, because there were a ton of sewing blogs, but there were a majority of quilting and kids crafts and things like that. And I was like, no. If I can't wear it, I don't want to make it. So I started doing fashion sewing, which at the time just wasn't a thing. And after that first year, I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, I think I could do this. And what prompted the business idea is that I made a skirt for myself. I posted it on my blog, and everybody went nuts for this skirt. It was, it was very Oscar de la Renta, just very, I seen something online and I sort of knocked it off.
Right.
And everybody went crazy, like, make this skirt for me. And I was like, oh, no, I don't sew for hire.
Right. No, you can sew it yourself.
Right. But at the time, I was struggling. I couldn't, I was trying to pay rent. It was nearing Christmas. I needed cash. I knew I had to buy Christmas presents. And I said, you know what, maybe I'll just take a couple of orders. So I went online that night and I made a blog post and I said, for the next 24 hours, I'm going to sell this skirt. I priced super high, like $250. I'm like, who going to buy a skirt for $250 from somebody they don't know? And I said, you're going to get in about 4 to 6 weeks.
And who wants to wait that long for something,
Exactly. Right? Posted it, went to bed, woke up in the morning, had thousands of dollars in my PayPal account. I was like, girl, who's going to sell these skirts? Because I was like, and in true Mimi G style at the time, I waited to the very last week.
Oh, no.
And when I tell you that, everyone in my household was sewing and cutting.
Skirts,
Somebody
yes.
was doing something. I got them all out and I said, I'm never doing that again. And I said, what if I could just teach them to do it? And that was my very first paid tutorial. I filmed it, I edited it, I put it up online. I had to manually send everyone the download because we didn't have all of this fancy stuff that we have now. And I made a lot of money that year. And when I got a $10.99K from PayPal at the end of the year, I said, where'd that money go? Like, I did what? By the year and a half of doing the blog, I was already making more than I was doing at my job. And I thought, if I could really focus on this, I think I could make this into something. And it took me a little while, but then I quit my job.
Right. And inspiration to a lot of people who say, you know what, I'm not sure I want to branch out into this world, and how can I make money? I think that's what a lot of people think. Yeah, that's great that I, just kind of click through it and troll all the time, but they want to know how to make money. Now, how do you feel that's made an impact? Certainly you've touched a lot of people through your blog, your lifestyle blog, and teaching them how to sew.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've made an impact in the community at all?
At first when I did the blog, I didn't realize, it was very much, I guess to some people could seem like it was just about sort of shopping and clothes and fabric and all of these things, right? Pictures of me in pretty outfits. And then it changed because I started to get emails from women all over the world sharing their stories with me. I'm going through a divorce, and I'm going through rehab. I've lost my children. I've lost my job. All of these really terrible stories, and they were sharing with me. And the one thing in common was that they had somehow found my blog, and that had given them a different purpose. They were either learning a new hobby or feeling better about themselves, or something was transforming them. And that's when I realized that the purpose of the blog was not about teaching people to sew. It was really my story. It was about teaching people that despite whatever circumstances you may have come from or currently find yourself in, what you can do with your life really just depends on you and how much you want that change. And so then the messaging changed, right? Because then I felt a sense of responsibility over the blog, over my social channels, to keep it safe, to keep it welcoming for everybody. And, when I'm walking down the street and people recognize me for sewing, like, I don't think people really, like, for me, it's still really crazy.
Right.
I'm standing at the valet waiting for my car, and this man's like, are you Mimi G? Yeah. Like, I follow you.
And you're like, how do you know my name?
And so that kind of experience, or when they see me and they share their stories with me, I think that's when I realized the impact that what I've done has had on not just my community, but other.
And for you, very personal, because we mentioned that in the beginning, is that at one point you were homeless in Los Angeles.
Yeah, actually, I've been homeless in Los Angeles a total of 3 times. The first time was with my oldest daughter. And then because of that, I ended up giving her to my mom. And my mom took her for me for a while. One of the things that I was homeless again twice just by myself. One sleeping in my car, sort of living out of my trunk, and then the other times literally sleeping, in the park or wherever I could find. And, giving my daughter to my mom that second time that I was homeless with her was probably the hardest one, because obviously it was like admitting to myself, you can't take care of yourself, and you really can't take care of this baby that you have. But in doing that, it sort of allowed me time to sort of gather myself, right? And although things didn't get better for me, right after that. I still went through a lot of very difficult times and domestic violence and all sorts of things. It gave me a purpose because I knew I needed to bring her home. And so that was sort of, my driving force to get it together. Really.
Something bigger than you. And that's certainly an inspiration for a lot of women, the obstacles that, and sometimes that's hard to say an obstacle. We obviously always grow from the things that happen to us. It's hard at the time when we're in them, but later on you look back and you're like, there's a reason I was there.
Yeah.
As hard as that was, and to look at where you are now. So if you had to do it all again, do you think you would?
I would. Yeah. And I say this with love, but I went home to Chicago after not being back there for like 18 years. And I looked around and I saw certain friends and family members that was sort of still in the same cycle. And I thought to myself for a minute that if I would have stayed, I probably would have been in that same cycle, right? In that same neighborhood, working the same jobs, trying my best to make ends meet, in some cases getting public assistance. And I thought, despite everything that I've been through, despite, having to survive, terrible bouts of domestic violence and separate instances and being homeless and having to beg people to feed you and your daughter, being a teen mom, I couldn't see another way where I would have gained as much strength and as much courage had I done it any other way. So, I know that in the midst of all of that stuff, and I say this to people when they're like, I'm going through all of these things. And I know that right now it doesn't feel like you're going to do something else. But trust me, you can make that change. And when I'm sitting in this apartment building with no lights, no running water, and I'm feeding my kids top ramen for about a month, I can make a cookbook on how many times you can freak some top ramen. You get this sense of, your life really depends on what changes you're willing to make. What sacrifices are you really willing to make to make those changes? So now that's my goal.
So what would you say has been the best part of this? And also on the flip side, the hardest part or maybe some things that you've gained in this process of becoming so well known around the world. The internet has made it that we can be international stars. What have you gained? What have you lost?
I've learned hard lessons about what to share, what not to share.
You can't be a completely open book?
I started that way because, I didn't know. Like when I started on social media, I had no idea that you could become social media famous. Like that wasn't a thing. You know what I'm saying? You were just sort of sharing your life. So everybody knew, my husband at the time, my children, they knew their names and all of these things. And I shared all of this information, and then when you go through life, and let's say you're going through a divorce and things aren't good and everybody's like, where's your husband? Where are this? Where's that? And you sort of feel like, I need to keep some of these things private. I learned a really good lesson. So I think that even now I tell people, in order to become, popular on social media, in order to really make an impact, you do have to share the personal side of yourself. You need to let people know that it's not just a brand, it's the person behind the brand, but just be careful about just how much you share and how you do it. But for me, even though looking back, I see all of these things that I've gone through and that I've shared and that's impacted people, I don't know that there's anything that's come from it that's been bad for me. I've sort of navigated through it, and you just do the best that you possibly can. And then, when it comes to the good, I can't even tell you that just 8 years ago, I was working 9-to-5 job and coming home and having nervous breakdowns in my bathroom before coming out to feed my kids and wondering how I'm gonna figure this out, to being where I am now. And that's all social media. That's all, people sharing and being inspired and having an impact. And so I wouldn't give any of it back. I wouldn't.
And I'm sure it's great to look down from the mountaintop at the valley that I was in, right? Thank goodness I made it all the way up that hill.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, because just it's so intriguing to me. When I grew up, and you probably hear this from a lot of people, my mom used to sew. And she taught me how to do it. I did a little bit, and after too many little knots in the fabric, I said, this is not my thing. Right. And that was, that was back when you had to kind of, wheel things. It wasn't so mechanical back then, or automated, I should say. And you've really brought a new sense of do it yourself to fashion, to a space where there is a lot of fast fashion. And I'm sure you found an audience because you have a generation, my daughter is among them, who say, I don't want to buy into that. Oh, that's so wasteful.
Right.
I want a better world as I continue to grow up and, as she has children, that we don't want to contribute to that fast fashion. And you know what? I'd rather go to a thrift store or I'd rather make it myself.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of what you're saying?
Yeah, it is. When I first started, it was very much women, especially women of color, black and brown, whose bodies are not, a size 2 or a size 4, who have curves, who the difference between the waist and the hips is more than 10 inches. That's difficult to shop. And that's why I started sewing, because I would go shopping and be depressed and sad because it didn't fit. And I would go home and be like, I got to do something. That's why I started to sew. And that's why a lot of other women, I think, started to sew. But the generation now is very much aware of, one, if I go buy something from, fast fashion, it's going to last me maybe a couple of washes. Right. And now it's gone. But now, they want to do things that are going to last them longer. And when I take time to make my own coats, that coat is going to be with me for years because it's made differently, it's treated differently, and it's made for my body. So I'm not concerned about things not fitting anymore. Or being able to go to the thrift store and find something that you want to change the buttons or you want to add something or refashion it. And that gives people so many more options than I think we had before. And, it's funny that you said that your mom sewed and taught you, because none of my kids sew. They have all tried it, but they were like, yeah, okay, Mom.
That's your thing.
That's your thing. But what I hear a lot of people say is, my mom used to sew or my grandma used to sew, and I wish I would have paid attention. But now I'm following you and I'm learning from you, and so that makes me happy.
I wanted to wrap it up by asking you if you had any advice to give to someone. As we mentioned before, you can be a blogger and become world famous, have a website, through social media, all those forms. For some women who say, I kind of want to do something, this feels like it could be my space. What advice would you have for them to make this something that they not only enjoy, but possibly could make a living at?
I think the first thing, and I say this on my podcast all the time, I have a podcast where I share a lot of business advice. And, one of the things I say, if you're looking to start a business, just make sure that it's in something that you really like. Because I love to sew. I love to design. I love it, and I would do it if I never made a penny from it. But it can sometimes get really hard because you're not just going to be sewing, right? Now you have to realize how you're going to run this business. And, part of the business that you're going to be creating, the creative fun part is very little. You're doing a whole lot of other things that are not so fun, right? And if as long as you really love what it is that you're doing, you're going to do it regardless. And if the reason that you're doing it is because you want to be social media famous, because that's like a cool thing, and you see everybody living this high life, which is probably fake.
Somebody else is behind that.
Somebody else's car they're taking a picture with. If that's the reason that you're doing it, or because you want to make money, I understand we all want to make money, but the passion has to come before. That love has to come before, because really the only reason that I truly believe that I've become as popular as I have is because I just really like to share what I know with other people and to help them do what I'm doing. And I think if your purpose is driven by wanting to help, a desire to really help others be better and grow, then the money comes after. It comes along the road.
Right. Mimi G, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I would like to say you've inspired me to sew, but
Yay.
We already know that's not going to happen.
Listen, girl, sign up for the Sew Academy. I'm going to send you a free link.
Okay.
I'm going to send you a free link, and I want to see what your thoughts are
I'll
after you watch
send you
a couple
a picture
videos.
of my first efforts right there, right? Some
or
kind
give
of
it to your
shirt.
daughter.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
give it to your
Actually, she
daughter.
wants a sewing machine that she
Beautiful.
will inherit from my mom. So, yes. Mimi G, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Until next time, be sure to subscribe to She's in Charge, the podcast. She's in Charge is brought to you by CBS 46 WGCL in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm your host, Tracy Hutchins. This episode was produced by Mandy Raidline. Eric Sander is our photojournalist, and Ray Merriman, our editor. To see pictures of Mimi G's sewing projects, to get a link to her blog and learn more about her husband's unique role in her sewing business, just click on our show notes. Thanks for joining us.